Joining today's podcast is my good friend Marc Sauer, the National Crosschecker East Scout for the Oakland A's. Welcome, Marc. I'm thrilled to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Wayne. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good show to get a perspective from a scout. We talked to a lot of pitching coaches, GMs, and I think you'll have a unique point of view.
Definitely.
I wanted to talk with you about command and control and how you scout it. For example, Mike Leitzinger drafted my son for the Yankees out of Dallas Baptist, and he's already in AAA. And according to Fangraphs, he has the highest command rating of any Yankee minor leaguer, and he's ranked number 16's Yankees prospect. He sits low 90s and was a senior sign. So clearly, Mike is a great scout to see that so far in advance. You also have a great reputation as a scout. So I wanted to have you on the show to see, what do you look for in pitchers?
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, I think all pitchers are a little bit different. Our job as scouts is to try and figure out what makes each individual pitcher a little bit unique that's going to allow them to advance through the minor leagues and ultimately get to the big leagues and either help our team win or, we get some kind of valuable trade compensation back for them that helps our team win. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, some of the easier things when you're scouting pitchers is to see the stuff, just read the radar gun with the velocity. And obviously, nowadays the spin rates are important on both the fastball and the breaking ball. But I think you make a good point. And, the control and the command aspect of it has gotten a little bit lost in the shuffle these days, I think. So, ultimately, when you're talking about pitching in the big leagues, that aspect of it is definitely just as important, if not even more important than just the pure stuff.
Yeah, because I've heard from other organizations that, we can train velocity. We know how to do that. Some things they don't really know how to train are command and control and character. I know character is another big one because it's hard. And you have to overcome a lot of adversity. You have to be a strong-willed person. So I think character also has a big play in that too.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with that. At some point, we see a lot of similar packages, stuff-wise, I would say, with pitchers. So that character aspect of it, I think, is kind of what separates some guys when you get to those upper levels as well. Or it can even prevent guys from reaching their ceiling, even at the lower levels. Maybe they never get to AA or AAA and give themselves a chance to get called up because the character and determination and that kind of thing is not in place. So I know some of our pitching coaches well, Emo, Scott Emerson, and Gil Patterson. I know you've talked to those guys, and
they're good
really
friends.
Fortunate to have them. I know they're good friends of yours, and Emo was my pitching coach in A-ball a long time ago with the A's.
So I didn't know that.
A long time, yeah. So those guys are great, but it's difficult, and that's one of the things I think as a scout, it's a little bit difficult to do on our end is really get to know these kids well enough. I mean, there's obviously some telltale signs that are obvious when you're watching a pitcher, but a lot of times
what would those kind of telltale? Like, say you were scouting a high school kid or even a college kid.
Sure.
What would be the kind of things that would tell you, hey, this guy might have something?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the character end of it, it's on the positive side, just kind of battling through adversity. I mean, especially high school, and you're going to go see games where the defense behind them just isn't very good.
Yeah.
Catchers may not be able to handle that kind of stuff that we're looking at. So it can be easy to a certain degree for guys to get frustrated, but I think, guys who pick up their teammates, guys who keep battling, hey, smack the catcher on the butt, get the next one, because you're going to need that catcher to block a breaking ball in the dirt or, throw out a runner trying to steal at some point. So there's aspects like that, just how they interact with their teammates, how they respond to coaches going to the mound. I mean, I've seen guys yell at coaches when they come out, even after the game. I mean, I've been at games where, kids they're cursing at their parents after the game when they're frustrated, stuff like that. So some of that stuff kind of slaps you right in the face, and it's easy to see. And then, part of our job is, especially the area scouts, because they see these guys more, but to kind of do a little background check, talk to some, coaches, obviously, but if they work at a facility in the wintertime that's a separate coach, try and, contact those people and see what kind of work they put in the off season. And, some guys even go as far as guidance counselors at schools and teachers and stuff like that. And you can hear sitting behind the plate or down the line at high school games, you can hear a lot of parents talk. And, sometimes you hear them, hey, this kid's great, he gets along with everybody. And sometimes you hear the opposite. So, I mean, obviously you have to look into, because there could be some ulterior motives from parents, obviously, but there's stuff that you just, you never know when you go to the ballpark what you're going to hear or what you're going to see that day, and it kind of all, comes into play when you do your final report on that guy.
Yeah. So, in terms of command and control, that how has that kind of evolved in scouting over the years? Like, it seems to me that too often people are kind of just looking at their radar gun, and it's like, how would they scout command and control as opposed to just looking at a radar gun?
Yeah, so it definitely, I believe, has evolved over the years, like you said. I just think now in the present day, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, but a lot of these kids are trained just to throw hard, to get, the best break on off-speed pitches, breaking balls. Change-ups, I think, have got lost in the shuffle a little bit, which is a shame, because it's, you talk
You got to change. Yeah, changing speeds is a big part of pitching.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, a changeup can be should be an integral part of your, mix for sure. Definitely if you want to be a starter and you're trying to go through a lineup 2 or 3 times. But
yeah, and that's a field pitch, and that's a field pitch. So that's part of command and control. Yeah.
And that's a good point. I mean, the feel is an excellent word for kind of what we're talking about. I don't think there's as much feel nowadays. It's just all kind of grip and rip. And, in the scouting industry, we've been kind of discussing this for the last probably 5 years or so. And it's a little bit unfortunate, because I think the baseball industry is kind of doing a disservice to developing pitchers a little bit. The drills that they do is all about just throwing hard, like you said. These guys at a lot of the facilities that are more well-known, they have the track man, and that stuff's all great, but you also have to be able to work in the strike zone. So it's, I think the feel part of it, like you said, has kind of been sacrificed a little bit. I think a lot of the younger kids feel like the harder you throw, the better chance you have to get drafted or signed, which, there's, to a certain degree, it does play part of it, but it's not the whole picture. So, it's just, you go out and do a lot of the stuff that we do in the summer, high school wise. And, my son's 16, he's a junior in high school now. So I see a lot of his peers, but just even scouting like we do, a lot of these, East Coast Pro showcases, area code games, a lot of the perfect game stuff, we only see pitchers go an inning or 2 at a time. And it's kind of, so it's almost, that's what we've been talking about as a scouting industry. It's almost like we're developing relievers. So they can just go out, they can air it out, they can throw as hard as they want. They try and get a swing and miss on every breaking ball. And I think, it's obviously been a while now since I played in the minor leagues, but, I remember going over stuff with Emo after every start, and I kind of did it myself on days I wasn't pitching, just sitting in the dugout, keeping a chart, watching hitters, kind of reading hitters. So when I pitched against those guys again, I would have a little bit of an idea of what my game plan was. I don't see anybody really doing that anymore.
Yeah, because when you're doing that thing, to execute that kind of plan, you have to have command. If you just have control, you're not going to be able to execute any kind of command.
For sure.
And we were talking about that in a few episodes, where I think the best thing you do as a pitcher is to, of course, your number one job is to get outs, but I think the best thing to do is get the most outs with the least amount of pitches.
Sure. Yeah. And I think a big part of that too, which, this whole process that we've kind of evolved into is, I've always told guys that I work with pitching wise, or, watch, that ask me my advice, and you have to be your own pitching coach on the mound for me. So you have to know, where you're off with your body from start to finish. Maybe it's release point at the end, but I think we've kind of limited a lot of the guys in their ability to think on their own, really. I mean, we're just providing everything like, okay, here's your printout. You look at a screen and you see spin rate, you see the location of where the ball was, and okay, maybe we got to change a grip here, which we've always done. They talk so much about pitch development, stuff like that, or pitch design. They have fancier names for it now, but guys have always played around with grips.
Yeah.
And you talk to Maddox and read his stuff. He changed grips every time he played catch to see what would work
Yeah.
best. So that end of it, I think we just haven't allowed some of these pitchers to really figure out their bodies and and how to stay healthy and pitch. And yeah, you have to have stuff, but a big part of it is like you said, being able to get outs on hopefully the least amount of pitches as possible so we can get deep into a game.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that gives value to a team. It gives your
For
team a
sure.
chance to win.
Yeah.
I think they think they'll get scouted or drafted if they're throwing really hard. I'll bet you've seen pitchers throw really hard that you kind of just thought, I'll pass. You know,
Sure. Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
like you said, there's different aspects of the whole process, but
it's a
I mean,
package, man.
ideally, the higher you are in the draft, I mean, you want to draft starters. I mean, that's what's harder to find in the big leagues. It costs more to, if you want to just go out and sign a starter, those guys cost a lot more than most relievers. I mean, there's some closers that make a lot of money, but yeah, it has a lot more value for our organization if we can draft and develop guys that can start in the big leagues. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that'll be out there and just, grunting and max effort up there at 96, 97, but maybe they don't have even an average breaking ball and the command is below average or well below average. And,
Yeah,
at that point, you try and figure out, really how much value is this guy going to have long term?
yeah, yeah. I've seen. It seems to me like a really marked change at Double A, where the batters are more selective, and if you just have a fastball at 95 to 100 down the middle, it's not going to work. It's like you're throwing hard, but if you can't command it, if it's right down the middle, it's going out of the park.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just on the flip side of the coin. I mean, I think a lot of these hitters see that velocity a lot more often now. Whereas years ago, if you hit 95, that was something the hitters don't
Yeah,
see all the time. But now,
yeah,
so many guys train for the velocity and they do throw hard, but it's not a big deal for a hitter to dig in there and see 95 straight down the middle anymore.
yeah. That's why changing speeds is so important. You
Right.
know.
Exactly.
So, how would you describe control and how would you describe command? Because I think too often I found people actually confuse them.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, so for me, control is just the ability to work in the strike zone. I mean, that's something that you can even just look at the stat sheet and kind of see how many
Yeah.
walks per nine. I mean, average is about 3, major league wise. So obviously, if you're a lot higher than that in college or high school, that's an issue. I mean, it's going to be harder, like you said, as you advance up and get to Double A, and that strike zone shrinks and hitters are better. So
Right.
at the control aspect of it is kind of a broader, painting there for me. The command part of it for me is, ideally a pitch called in a certain location, the ability to execute that pitch to the location. Emo always gives a good line, and I like it. He always says, your pitcher's job when you get to the big leagues, if you're really good, you try and make balls look like strikes and strikes look like balls.
Yeah.
So
Email
I mean,
has
I
so
know
many
stuff
great
that's great.
sayings.
Yeah, he has so many sayings, but I like that one because I think when you think about it from a hitter's perspective, if you think the pitch is off the plate and it winds up the movement of it brings it back over the plate, it's harder to hit and then reverse. If it looks like a strike and then you can get it out of the zone, maybe you get a swing and miss. So
Yeah, and
I do like it.
yeah, and I think that a command also is being able to throw a pitch anywhere you want, in or out of the zone, because
Sure.
uh, as you move up, you need to claim the whole plate. So you can't let a batter claim part of the plate, or you're going to have a hard day.
For sure. Yeah, no doubt. As those hitters get better, you have to have the ability to throw, all quadrants of the plate for sure. And like you said, expand off of it, especially when you get ahead in the count. Or if you get hitters that are super aggressive early in the count, you expand off the plate a little bit, and it'll help you.
So if you were scouting for control, clearly you can look at the stats or look at the game. But I made that command tracker target because I found there wasn't really a good way to train and measure command. And so how would you measure command in a game without looking at the video very intently for hours?
Right. Yeah. That's a little bit more difficult. I think for a lot of the stuff that we do scouting wise is a little easier when you get to the college level, but the high school level, obviously kids are a little bit less refined and stuff like that. But one of the ways that I try and do it is just to really pay attention to where the catcher's setting up, especially if it's later in the count and he's shifted maybe to a third of the plate or on the corner. At least I know that the pitcher's trying to throw it to that side of the plate. It's hard without knowing what the pitch call is. It could be a fastball up or a fastball down. But if the catcher,
he could be putting a glove. It's a strike point and he wants it here.
Exactly. So it's hard to really know when you don't have all the info like that to see how well he's really executing. But at least I can tell that he was trying to maybe work away to a righty and he got the ball there instead of leaving it arm side and stuff like that. But it is probably a little more difficult to train, like you said, than some other stuff. I do like your command tracker deal because it not only gives the strike zone, but the row around the strike zone where you said,
the shadow zone. Yeah, because that target gives you the intended location, which could be a 5x7 square or multiple 5x7 squares, so you can have an area.
Right.
But it also has another thing called good misses. So you can define what squares are a good miss, because if you're training your pitchers to execute their idea, if you're going to go low and away, go really low and away if you miss, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I agree 100%.
Yeah. So good news is there are a couple really good colleges already using command trackers. So I'm sure
good.
You can ask them, hey, what's your control percent for your pitchers?
Yeah.
Like Dallas Baptist is one, Louisiana Tech is another one. Those are kind of like leaders in college technology.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Hopefully more jump on board. It's definitely a good tool.
I hope so. I really believe it's a great tool for training an area that hasn't been really focused on.
Yeah, for sure.
If you were scouting a kid and you wanted to project if he's going to have command as he gets older, are there any kind of like things you would see that would kind of give you a hint?
Yeah, I think outside of just the sheer desire to do it, because like we talked about, I think a lot of kids get caught up in just the other stuff, outside of that. But just guys that have the mental toughness and the willpower to just focus on doing it with every pitch.
That's a huge part of command, right? It's like I'm a big fan of the idea of thoughts become things. I always say that.
Yeah.
And I believe you can have negative thoughts in your mind, but I also think you need that positive, that I'm throwing that pitch in that spot and here's how it's going to move. And as a pitcher, if you have that mindset, it's so important.
Sure. Yeah, it's so important. Even could take it as far as, I always tell guys who are struggling with command a little bit or anything really, but just from the time you pick up a baseball every day, when you go to play catch, don't just go play catch to warm up and go through the motions. Really
throw to a glove, throw to something.
Pick something out, whether it's one shoulder, the other shoulder, the belt, face, whatever it is. But every throw, you have an opportunity to work on something. And
then it gets ingrained, right?
Right. Yeah, you can go out and waste 30, 40, 50 throws just getting your arm loose, or you could focus on every single one, make sure your feet are in the right place and work on a release point or change ups, when you're coming back in, or two seam, whatever it is at shorter distances. But yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Just like you talked about, the mental aspect of it. And and the willingness to really lock in and be focused every time you throw a ball. Because that's, as pitchers, that's a hard thing. You can't just go out like a hitter and take 500 swings a day. So you
Right.
gotta, you have to make the most of whatever work you're doing that day, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. I always
yeah.
described a drill that my son did, which one of them was I had 4x4s stacked up in like a wall.
Okay.
There was a target on that. It was a different target than he used for training.
Okay.
And he had to throw the ball at a target. The ball would bounce erratically because it hit a corner of a 4x4 and it'd go.
Okay.
You have to feel that ball, and then you have to throw that ball to a target like towards first base.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, and so every part of that drill was focused on intent, hitting a spot.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so all the
That's
training
great.
was okay. You're trying to throw hard, or you're trying to field, but it was always about throwing to a spot, like you said.
Yeah. 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 And then when you, once you get past that, you know, just the focus of it, I think some, you know, I say athleticism doesn't always have to be, you know, a guy that can run fast or dunk a basketball, but maybe more of a better way to explain it is just the feel for your body, you know, trying to have a repeatable delivery. You know, obviously the more looseness that's there usually allows you to stay a little bit more healthy and find a consistent release point, as opposed to the real stiff guys that are more, you know, either real muscle bound or just not very flexible. But yeah, that
Yeah, and I see some guys throw. I cringe because like I feel like they're falling apart if they keep throwing that way.
yeah, for sure. For
You know?
sure. And then, you know, that kind of leads into your arm action and delivery stuff where, you know, like I always tell people, it, you watch TV, there's going to be guys in the big leagues that look different, but there's always some, you know, little focal points you look for, where they're at foot strike. You know, there's the effort of it. Like we just talked about the stiffness, you know, if your arm action's severely offline or stride is severely offline, stuff like that. So I think there's some room, some margin for error in there with pitching, because everybody's bodies work a little different and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But yeah, there are definitely things that would lead you to believe maybe an injury or maybe command issues could come into play down the road at some point.
Yeah, I always described the mechanics for command as if you were trying to throw from a rowboat that was rocking, you probably could hit spots by timing the waves and all that.
Right.
But wouldn't it be better to have a still head, calm body, and could throw from you know from ground?
Yeah.
You'll have a much better chance of having command. So I think, yeah, you can have command by rocking around, but
Yeah.
uh, I think it's better to have a quiet. I think the head is also the biggest one. If I see the head ragging off, I tend to see, poor command when I see that.
Sure. Yeah. It's you know, a difficult line to walk, I guess, in the scouting world. I mean, ideally, you know, we're trying to get guys in the system where guys like Gil and Emo obviously don't have to make an overhaul in deliveries. I mean, you don't want that, but you do have to give them some kind of stuff too to work with. So I think that's what you're trying to find as a scout, kind of that, in an ideal world. I mean, those guys go in the first round that have everything, you know, the good delivery and the stuff. But like you said, there are definitely certain things, you know, that are harder for pitching coaches to kind of deal with and you know, develop that command and control. But if they have that down, I think it's sometimes easier to maybe play with a grip, or, you know, add a little cutter or
Yeah,
something like that, than it is to get somebody to stop doing something with their body that they've been doing for a long time.
yeah. Or like, for example, if you saw a guy you really like, but you see his head, lots of problems moving his head, and you realize that if he could manage to get his head still, he'll probably have better command. You could probably go to
Sure.
Gil and say, here's this guy, take a look. What do you think if we can get his head to whatever? And he would give you an idea of,
Yeah.
is that hard to do or not hard to do?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I do that, I don't say all the time, but a handful of times every spring. I'm out watching games, and, you know, there's a guy I really like the stuff, and I kind of think I have an idea of what we would need to do, but I'll send it over to Gil or Emo and just say, hey, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts? You know, is this somewhat of an easy fix, or is this going to be something that's always going to kind of be a battle with this guy to try and figure it out. So
Yeah. And Gil and Emo are an enormous resource because all their experience, knowledge that they have, that's a treasure trove to have at
for
your
sure,
disposal.
yeah, yeah, they're both great.
We were talking about the mental part with Gil a lot, and we talked about Doc Holliday and how
Yep.
he had a highest ERA in the majors for anyone over 100 innings, and that got sent down, and then worked with Dorfman
Okay.
on his mental, changed his arm slot, went back to the majors and become an awesome pitcher.
Right.
Uh, Greg Maddux kind of did the same kind of thing, had a mental, roadblock. I think Gil said he also worked with Dorfman.
Okay.
Uh, have you seen that kind of thing where a player that you're scouting, it's like, I think there's a mental, component to what he needs to train, like get tougher or more focused.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it happens, on different ends. I mean, there's even guys, we have a kid in our minor league system right now, Tyler Baum, who was a high pick and had really good stuff at UNC. And for whatever reason, around that COVID time, kind of lost his feel. And they tried a lot of different things with him. And finally, it just clicked on, getting in there. His confidence came back. He's able to work in the strike zone, and he had a great year this year.
Awesome.
So, that stuff. But again, like you talk to Gil and everybody, the performance coaches that talked to him, he never gave up. He was always willing to try something else. If one thing didn't work on the pitching mechanic side, then he was looking for an avenue on the mental side or watching video or, whatever it was. He was mentally tough enough and he wanted it bad enough that he was going to just keep plugging away until he figured out, how to make an adjustment and get it back. So,
Yeah.
that happens. And kind of like you talked about too, getting to that AA level, you see guys that are starters all the time and they get to AA and maybe they go into the bullpen and, they get a little uptick in velo and, but those guys, a lot of times they have that mental toughness to be able to pitch at the end of the games. And then you have some guys that we've had that get to that level and they kind of take it the other way. They feel like they're slighted a little bit. They still think they're a starter and it just kind of, they never adapt to the bullpen and they fizzle out there. So, two of the guys that kind of stick in my head on that are Andrew Bailey and Lou Trevino. I mean, those guys were both college starters, smaller schools in the Northeast. Were pretty good up until AA, but kind of hit a little wall there, flipped to the bullpen, and then they both, had very good, points in their career as relievers in the major leagues. So, it's hard because every person's their own individual, but that willingness to kind of battle through and still got a uniform on, you still got the ball in your hand and a chance to get hitters out. So you got to do whatever you have to do to be able to have success.
Yeah. Yeah. I made up a list of things that I thought were really important for a pitcher. I'd like to know what you think are the top four. I'm going to show you the list on the screen.
Okay.
And I just want to know what you think are the kind of the most important four that are needed. So the items are not in any kind of order. It's just the first one is character, command, changing speeds, movement, max velocity, sequencing, reading batters, and mental toughness. How would you order those?
All right. My top four, I would say out of that group would be command, changing speeds, mental toughness, which I guess you could tie character into that a little bit, although it could be different as
Yeah.
well. And then still think reading batters is important. Like we talked about, I think that's a little bit of a lost art. And I guess if I was cheating a little bit to get one more in there, I think after you read the batters, I think you then have to know how to sequence your pitches to get them out.
Oh, absolutely. For example, part of the need for command is that if you read batters, as you know as a pitcher, he is a flinch or he doesn't flinch or he's hunting your slider. you have to know how to read that. Then you have to know, well, what pitch should I throw to counter that?
Sure.
And then you have to know, you have to have the command to execute that pitch. So
Yep.
it's kind of like a package, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And they're all, I mean, you can't go wrong. Like you said, there's no right or wrong answer with that group of words there to explain pitching for sure. They're all important.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been great having you on the show. I love having a perspective that's been different from the other guests, and that's how you learn. You know, we learn from each other.
For sure. I love talking about pitching and all aspects of the game for sure, but it's definitely fun to pick each other's brain.
Yeah, I think Gil was saying, why don't we have a show where you have me and Gil and Emo on the show, and
Yeah.
that's gonna be a great, you know, because when I talk to people all the time, it's he has so many great sayings. He's just a
Oh
great coach,
yeah, he does for sure.
you
For
know.
sure. He has a lot of great info. He's tireless worker. He's always at it to try and figure out something to get his pitchers better. So
Absolutely,
he's
absolutely.
the best.
All right, Mark. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
You too, Wayne. Take care. Thanks for having me.
All right.